Hi there, and welcome to our very first video blog. I'm excited to share this with you. We're going to be providing more free education to you guys in a variety of different ways. We're going to be doing written blogs, but we're also going to be doing video blogs like this one as well, so that you have the opportunity to hear some of the material as well as have some visuals to support what we're talking about. My name is Nick Lambe. I'm a massage therapist, strength coach, and health coach. I'm also the wellness specialist for Naples Personal Training. What we're going to be talking about today is recovery. We're going to be talking about this idea of recovery for health and fitness. And why this is so important is because what we're trying to accomplish with anything in health and fitness is adaptation. We're trying to really get our body to adapt, and this is where we achieve and maintain the best possible results. But what we often find is that people are on opposite ends of the spectrum here, where they're either on the nothing scale, where they're not providing really enough stimulus in order to get that adaptation that we want that's going to ultimately make them healthier, or they're doing the all mentality, where they're providing too much stimulus and they're not actually allowing their body to recover and therefore get the adaptations that we want. And this is what we're going to ultimately be talking about today, and understanding why that recovery process and those recovery modalities are going to be so important. And I think very often we don't really consider what's actually occurring when we exercise, right? What are we actually trying to accomplish? What is the process by which we're actually getting better or getting healthier when we exercise? I think everybody knows that exercise, of course, is beneficial for us. We know it's a good thing, but how does that actually happen? So what happens is we provide a stimulus. In this case, we're talking about a training stimulus or an exercise stimulus. And this is basically a physical stress or any kind of stress that we're placing on the body. And it's a temporary stress, with the idea being that the end goal is trying to increase our baseline of fitness and baseline of health, right? We provide a small dosage of stress to, in the long term, be able to tolerate more stress, right? Our new level of baseline. And what ends up happening is when we provide this stimulus, we're causing some micro damage, right? We're causing some damage to muscle tissue. We're causing some inflammation, some low level inflammation within the body. And that's perfectly fine, because in small doses, right, anything that's usually good for you in the long term, or anything that we provide a short term dosage of, could be potentially good for you in the long term. But this process only actually happens via recovery. So we can see here, we provide the training stimulus and we go into this state of a bit of fatigue, right? Where your body is trying to deal with the stressor that you just put on it. We can see that the process that leads us back to not only our baseline level of health and fitness, but even higher than that, occurs via recovery, right? This is how your body is actually adapting. And what we find is that people are not providing enough of these recovery stimulus. They're not placing enough emphasis on this idea of recovery, and therefore they might be getting stuck in this state of fatigue, where not only are they not even getting back to their baseline level of health and fitness, they're actually in some instances below that, where in some cases, as hard as this is to believe, exercise is actually doing more damage than it's doing good. This comes down to really the Goldilocks principle, right? There is a sweet spot and there's a middle ground of providing exercise, or any kind of stimulus for that matter, where there is certainly too little, right? Where if we're not exercising enough and we're not providing any stimulus at all, we're of course not going to adapt. The body doesn't have any reason to adapt. But there's certainly a level of too much, right? Of too much stimulus, of too much stress. And in this instance, the body just doesn't have the capacity to be able to recover, to get the adaptations that we want, to get back to that baseline of health and fitness. And when we're trying to find this middle ground, it's really simple. If we're going to simplify it, it's really a balance between stress and recovery. We're trying to keep these balance scales as even as possible. And it's very difficult, especially when we don't have an emphasis on recovery, right? If there's not things that we're doing regularly that are recovery based, and there's constantly things that are going to add to the stress side of this scale, it's going to really work against us to get the adaptations and response that we want. And this is something that I always try to stress with clients, is that all types of stress are cumulative. all types of stress add up, no matter where they come from, and they all tip on the side of that stress and recovery scale, that balance scale that we just showed. So whether the stressors are physical, mental, digestive, emotional, environmental, whatever those stresses are, again, they're cumulative and they continue to add. And if we don't have the right amount of recovery to balance that scale out, it's going to be very hard for us to maintain good health, good fitness, and to get the responses that we want out of exercise or any interventions that we're making. This is something that we have to emphasize and understand, is that exercise is a stressor as well, right? It's a physical and structural stress. So it's adding to that cumulative load. So we have to make sure that we're programming and talking about recovery enough. And that's the whole point of what we're discussing today. The best analogy for this that I often explain to clients is thinking about a glass of water. The water within the glass is stress. The glass is our body and our resilience, our ability to tolerate really life and be our most healthy. And when too much stress has built up and our glass of water overflows because there's only so much that it can actually take, this is where we see adverse health. And this is where we see even a state of overtraining or overdoing it, where it's very difficult to bounce back when we get to this state. When we've overflowed our glass of water with too much stress, it's very difficult to clean that water spill up, right? It's very difficult to get back to a place of good baseline and health and fitness. So we want to really make sure that we never get to that point. And what recovery strategies ultimately do is pour water out of the glass, because stress is inevitable. It's a part of life, and that's perfectly fine, right? There will be things that add stress to us nutritionally, environmentally, in our life, right? And that's perfectly acceptable, but we have to have things that pour that glass of water out. And these are the pillars of recovery, and these are the things that we can essentially do to start to pour some water out of that glass and really get us back to a good state where we can tolerate more stress and we can tolerate more in life, right? Giving us more of a buffer zone. And we're not going to, in this blog, give specific strategies for each one of these pillars. That's going to be coming here in the next couple of weeks, but we're going to briefly introduce each one of them, again, with this idea of understanding just how important recovery is. So the first thing is awareness, right? And just by going through the first few slides here and understanding this principle of balancing stress and recovery, not only in exercise, but in life in general, you're already taking those steps in the right direction. But the first step is always awareness, right? It's always an understanding of just how important this thought process actually is. The next thing, and probably the most powerful and most important recovery modality, is something that I personally am very passionate about and have spent a lot of time with, and that's sleep. So one of the things that I provide at Naples Personal Training is sleep coaching. And we very often find that sleep issues are behavioral in nature, meaning that they can require some coaching. But sleep is the ultimate recovery strategy. It pours the most amount of water out of that glass. I want to briefly talk about what we call the autonomic nervous system. And I'm not going to get too sciencey on this. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole too much, but the autonomic, or what we'll call automatic nervous system, is the branch of your nervous system that essentially controls all the processes of your body that you don't consciously think about. All the things that operate in the background that you're not really thinking about on a second by second basis, right? Things like your heart rate, your breathing rate, digestion, all these things that are constantly being changed and constantly being regulated based on what's going on, but that we're not thinking about. Now, we have two branches within this autonomic or automatic nervous system. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which you may have heard as your fight or flight or stress response. And this is very needed. This is needed for short-term survival. This is needed for exercise as well. The best analogy for this is you're driving and someone swerves in front of you and you really need to jam on your brakes. You notice that you're a lot more focused. You've had blood rush to some areas that needed to grip the wheel tight, to jam on the brakes. Your heart rate is elevated, right? And all those things were necessary for you to be able to not hit the car that swerved in front of you. So we need this sympathetic nervous system, right? We need this fight or flight response. However, we find that in modern life, and with all the stressors that are unfortunately out there, especially right now, given the current landscape, there's constantly things that are triggering that fight or flight nervous system, right? That fight or flight side of the nervous system. And what we find is that when we spend too much time there, because we're not meant to be there long term, it can really disrupt our health and disrupt our ability to get optimal fitness. And on the opposite side of this is where we should be spending much more of our time. And this is the parasympathetic branch, or what we'll call the rest and digest recovery side of your nervous system. And this is essentially what we need for long-term survival. This is where that adaptation occurs, where your body is recovering and adapting and building back up regardless of what stressors have been put into the body. And we need to be spending more time in this rest and digest side of the nervous system. But again, it's very difficult to be there when there's constantly stressors that are coming in. So one of the things that we'll talk about here in the coming days is what are some of those strategies. And one of the most powerful and really easy to do and easy to implement, doesn't require anything else, is breath work, is breathing. And breathing has the ability to be a window into that autonomic or automatic nervous system pretty much right away. It has the ability to take us from the sympathetic side of the nervous system, right, the fight or flight, and bring us to the rest and recovery side of the nervous system. And basically, the best way to do this is with paced breathing. And what you ultimately want to aim for is for your exhale to be longer than your inhale. An exhale, and a good long exhale, is a recovery strategy, whereas an inhale is a sympathetic or fight or flight strategy. It's a way to mobilize energy when you need it. So here we can see a 4-7-8 breathing pattern. And this basically is a 4-second inhale, a 7-second breath hold, which can be aggressive to start, and an 8-second exhale. Now, I typically recommend clients start with a lower number for the breath hold. So maybe this is something like a 4-2-8, where you're breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 2 seconds, and then breathing out through the mouth for 8 seconds. Again, just a nice long exhale. And this is something that you can do not only following exercise, but something that you can implement in stressful times within your life, really across the board, again, to have that way to quickly bring you back to that rest and recovery side of your nervous system. The next thing is mindset. And this is very underestimated when we talk about health and fitness, but it's really important to have the right mindset around your goals and around health and fitness. And the best distinction here and the best way to look at this is the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is, exactly as the name suggests, being fixed in what your thinking is, thinking that you can't get better, you give up when you get frustrated, you don't deal well with failure, and you get stuck in these situations. And a growth mindset is really looking at any failure or any challenges that come in your way as an ability and opportunity to grow, right? To get better. And this is ultimately the name of the game with exercise and health and fitness. So we have to make sure that we're in the right mindset, that we're promoting a growth mindset. So in the coming weeks here, we're going to have some strategies that actually help you do that, but just introducing that idea of just how important your mindset really is. And we talked about types of stress, and emotional stress, mental stress is a big one that really can add a lot to that cumulative load, right? That can tip the balance in a way that we don't want. The next strategy is not surprising, is nutrition, right? What you eat matters. And what we'll talk about as well is when you eat matters, right? Timing is very important to this as well, but food is a very powerful way in which we can stimulate recovery or not stimulate recovery when we're not getting the right nutrition. The next is conditioning, right? And this is really your aerobic system, right? This is the energy system that allows you to be fit and be healthy, right? And we can look at this through a variety of different ways. Probably the easiest of which is, what is your resting heart rate? What is your heart rate first thing in the morning when you wake up? And looking at how that changes in response to exercise and stress and other stimuluses that are added, again, that tip you in favor or tip the load in a favor that you might not want. So what we can find is that when your resting heart rate elevates in a few days, right? So you're taking it the same time every morning, and then all of a sudden for 3 days, you find that that resting heart rate is a little bit higher. That's a pretty good indicator that you're spending too much time in that fight or flight side of your nervous system, that you're under recovered from stress. So again, more to come on this, but just the idea that something as simple as taking resting heart rate in the morning can really give and be a powerful marker for looking at the balance of recovery. And then lastly here is just managing load. So this is, again, the balance of, we want to look at our body as that glass of water, right? And we want to make sure that we're doing things to empty out that water, to empty out that stress, and doing things like promoting sleep, dialing in on nutrition, prioritizing breathing, all of the strategies that we're going to be talking about here in the next few days that are ultimately recovery based. And we think we're missing out on these things within what we typically do in our programs. So how can you learn more about how to recover? Again, like I said, we're going to have some blogs and video blogs that follow up on this here in the coming days to provide you with some practical strategies. But you can call us at the number here and you can ask about our Wellness Concierge program. It's something that Kevin and I run, and it's something that we basically take you through this entire process of recovery and really health in general. So helping you understand how you find this balance of all the different things that can influence your health and your well-being, and put together a program and really kind of walk you through that process. You can also email Kevin or myself at kevin@naplespersonaltraining.com. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening, and I look forward to speaking with you guys soon.